As a state legislator, what I've seen in Springfield is a lot of power being wielded by the public sector unions. The public unions in Illinois spend more money on their political activities than they do on representing their members.
So Liberty Justice Center had been hearing from government workers for years that they were unhappy, they needed to pay money to AFSCME or SEIU or a teachers union just so they could work in public service. But a lot of these workers were reluctant to put their name on any type of case filing or take a public stance on this. And then in 2015, in the spring, we met Mark Janus, and he had been working for state government for a few years, was very unhappy about the situation, and was willing to be a part of a case. And so we filed his case in March of 2015, and the rest is history.
I'm Jodi Carroll with another edition of Upstream Ideas, Heart of the Matter. The recent Supreme Court ruling in Janus v. AFSCME, a case that tested the constitutionality of public sector union fees, was a victory for worker freedom. In 22 states, including Illinois, state workers had been forced to fund a union they didn't want to belong to. Janus v. AFSCME has changed that. What does that mean for Illinois? Joining me today to get to the heart of the matter are Diana Rickert, Vice President of the Liberty Justice Center, the organization that took this case to the Supreme Court and won, and State Representative Margo McDermed, a Republican in the Illinois House representing the state's 37th House District. Diana and Margo, thank you so much for joining me today. What an exciting time this is for worker freedom. You know, and Diana, you were really at the forefront of the Janus case, and you know that almost immediately after the ruling came, the state sent out instructions to workers about how to opt out and telling them that they had to opt in order to remain in a union. So going forward, what do you think this ruling means for those Illinois state workers?
So this ruling is huge for anybody in Illinois who works in the public sector, whether you're at the state, a public school teacher, or a first responder, and people in 21 other states that do not have right to work laws. So we're talking about 5 million public sector employees across the country whose lives have been changed by this ruling. And what this means is that for the first time in their career, they can go to work in public service without having to give a cut of their paycheck to a government union first. They finally have the ability to make the decision for themselves. Do I want to be in this union? Do I want to pay this union money? Do I want to support them financially? Do I agree with what they're doing? And they finally have the ability to say no if they don't want to be affiliated with the union and pay them money. So this is huge. Imagine if you've worked for state government or a school district for 30 years and you've always had to give part of your paycheck to someone who you didn't want anything to do with. Now these workers finally have a choice and a voice in the matter.
Again, great times for worker freedom. So Margo, you have an interesting perspective because you're in the General Assembly. You know exactly firsthand how public unions impact legislators and legislation. And as you know, in 2011 in Wisconsin, Governor Walker, when they did this there, the Wisconsin Education Association lost almost 30% of its memberships overnight. And it is said that nationally, estimates have said that this Janus ruling could cost public sector unions more than $2 billion in political cash. We live in Illinois. We know how powerful the unions are here. They push millions of dollars into the campaigns for Democrats. So from that perspective, for the state of Illinois, what do you think this means to the state?
I think this is going to be a sea change in the state of Illinois. Up until now, the public unions have had a lot of power. the Democrat Party relies on them very heavily for money and for boots on the ground during election season. And if that money is reduced, and if folks don't really feel like their job is dependent on, supporting this candidate or that candidate during election time, that could make a big difference in terms of the support that the Democrat Party has out there.
So Diana, what do you say to the Wisconsin argument and what happened there?
So it's a little bit different situation than the Janus ruling because when Wisconsin enacted right to work for government workers, it also included a lot of different collective bargaining reforms. And I think that the moral of the story from the Supreme Court is we've never seen anything like it. You're talking about a 40-year precedent that has been overturned. Wow. And restoring people's rights to freedom of association and free speech, and we've never seen anything like it, so it's really tough to predict what's going to happen, but we should always err on the side of giving people back their freedoms and restoring their rights, because no matter what may happen after that, that is the right thing to do in this country.
Absolutely. Yeah, so moving on to that, because it does seem like the political candidates really should function for the people, not necessarily for the unions, right? I think it's interesting in their logic, because part of the argument is, like I said, they say union jobs have been the pathway to the middle class for women. But on the other hand, if you don't mandate it, like you said earlier, if you don't mandate it, then these women won't be able to get into the middle class. Well, your argument is kind of, it's so good for the individual, but we have to mandate it. If it's so good, people will choose it, right? Maybe if it gets better now, they actually will choose it. For the right reasons.
And I think it will give members more voice in what the union is working for. One of the situations that I hear a lot about is benefits for older union members are much more significant than younger union members. And if the only way that you're going to recruit is by having salaries at the starting end of the union participation be higher and the benefits be higher, that's going to move people. I see young teachers in my district are in tears because it's really hard to pay your school loans and try to save, because your pension's not going to be there if you're a 30-something teacher, and pay dues. And so I think that to the extent that the unions are looking not just toward the senior members that are of course all the union managers, leaders, but toward the younger members, that's a benefit for people trying to move into the middle class.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of situations, some of these younger members never got to vote on union representation at their workplace.
Excellent point. Yes.
And these unions have been in place since before they were born. So where is their voice or their representation? They don't have any. They're working under the conditions of generations long gone and getting something that they potentially don't want, and then they were forced to pay for it on top of that. So that's why this decision is so empowering, and it's not anti-union, it's in favor of everybody making their own choice. The right to say no to a union is just as important as the right to say yes, and that's what the Supreme Court finally restored.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is such a big part of the narrative, that it's anti-union. And why is choice anti-anything? It's the choice of the individual. So when people say that this ruling is the death of public sector unions, what do you say to that?
I find it interesting that government unions have so little confidence in their ability to attract organic, voluntary support. There's no other group in America where you have to be a member of this group. I don't have to pay money to the NRA if I own a gun, or I don't have to pay money to a particular church or civic organization. And it goes to show how out of touch these government unions might be if they think the only way that they can exist is if you force people to give them money or you lose your job.
Right.
Then it shows that there's not really support there in any situation.
And to the extent that they continue to grow and thrive post-Janus, it will be because they're delivering more services to their members. Right now, most public unions are spending more money on political work than they are actually on services to their members. And if that were reversed, it seems to me that wouldn't necessarily be the end of the unions. The unions might be more robust by providing more benefits to their members. So I think their fate is in the hands of the union.
But one of the things, I don't know if you heard this, but again, within moments of the Janus ruling, people were calling it sexist. And going on to say, union jobs have been the pathway to the middle class for women. We like to focus on this show, how public policy impacts women and households. So from that perspective, what do you guys say to that statement?
Well, there are women that are members of the union, but there are also women that are not members of the union that are taxpayers that are impacted by,
Good point.
the very tight relationship between the Democrat Party in Illinois and the public unions. And that costs taxpayers. I hear that from people in my district all the time. They feel like the deck is stacked against them. So, and this doesn't say that all the wage victories that unions have made are going to be rolled back tomorrow. That's not what it says. What it does is that it just kind of evens up the bargaining power. I mean, nobody's taking away anyone's job or anyone's salary. So I don't really see how it's sexist. There are women union members and non-union
Right,
members.
sure.
Men are in the union too.
Right. It's really good fodder.
Yeah.
Diana?
Well, this ruling should be empowering for women because women have the ability to choose for themselves which groups they want to affiliate with. And I don't know why anyone ever thought it was acceptable for some political figure or a politician or a government union leader to make that choice for women. I thought that the last 20, 30 years have been all about empowering women to make their own choices, except for when it comes to your employment, we will make that choice for you. Seems a little bit counterintuitive to the typical thought on empowering women. So I think this ruling would be very empowering for them, especially in the teaching sector, where most public school teachers are women. They get to decide for themselves if they want to be affiliated with the union. And I think the other thing is it gives them a greater voice in the workplace because the union needs to be more accountable to them. They're not just going to get part of their paycheck for nothing. They're going to have to be responsive and accountable and accommodating to these women that are teaching the next generation and give them what they want. Otherwise, they won't have their money or their support.
I find it interesting that they want to talk about women being empowered, but you realize you can't move yourself into the middle class without this entity doing it for you. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I wish you both good luck in your endeavors to expand individual freedom in Illinois and beyond. Good luck to you.
Thanks, Jodi.
And thank you for joining us today as we get to the heart of the matter. See you next time.